Lord. Recording in progress. She's so fancy. All right, let's talk about CERN, y'all. For all my participants. So we're going to break it down just in the natural for what CERN is. And then, of course, we're going to go to the Word of God. But CERN is a natural organization, right? It's here, it's tangible. So, CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, it is a research organization that operates the largest particle physics laboratory in the world. So when you was in science class and elementary, middle, and high school, and the little stuff that they were teaching you about matter and solids and gas and things of that nature, they take this to the next level. They're trying to get down to the particles, like the things that you can barely see, like without microscopes and high powered stuff. They're trying to get to the itty bitty part of it, the root of the existence of the thing. It was established in 1954, and the organization is based in a northwest suburb of Geneva on the Franco-Swiss border and has 23 member states. Israel is the only non-European country granted full membership. Catch that. Israel is the only non-European country granted full membership. That should tell you something right there, because our eyes should always be where on Israel, especially as relates to the last days and the signs of the time. And they are a full member of this organization that is studying particles. So CERN is an official United Nations observer. So what do you do when you observe? It's like you're looking and you're watching. So it makes you wonder, what are we looking and watching for? I'm always going to try to encourage you to ask the questions to go deeper, right? So, and I want you to keep that in mind. Like, just even the fact that Israel is the only non European country granted full membership. That is not by happenstance. So within CERN, and the part that I'm really going to focus on, because they have several projects that they work on, there are several experiments, I should say. I do believe it was six. And I actually went on their website and they have videos on YouTube. And I watched the video where they have created a day called, I think it was like Dark Matter Day. Like it was a day, they was like, this isn't Halloween, but this is Dark Matter Day. And they literally celebrate it. And they have people tune in from across the world and ask questions. And the one thing that I noticed before I go forward in the video is that a large number of their uh how do you say it? Physicists, those who work in the lab, were of like Indian descent. I noticed that, and I thought that was interesting. Even to the point where as they were asking questions, it was very hard to understand what the answer was because the accents were so thick. I didn't see too many African American, Hispanic, Latino um, doctors working in their labs. It was more so Caucasian, European, um, and Indian. And I think we'll kind of touch on that a little more later. So within CERN, there's a LHC. It's a Large Hadron Collider, HADRON. It resides in a 17-mile subterranean loop beneath the France-Switzerland border near Geneva. And this collider smashes particles at nearly the speed of light or above the speed of light, depending on how much energy and power they're able to generate. So there are other CERNs located in different places, even some in the United States, but this is the largest facility. So CERN's main function is to provide the particle accelerators and other infrastructure needed for high energy physics research. So again, we're talking about particles, causing them to collide, and then we're going to get into, well, the why. Like, why do we want the particles to collide? And why are they investing so much to do this? As a result, numerous experiments have been constructed at CERN through international collaborations. Now, international, that means across the world. That means we can't get along for anything else, but we can internationally decide to get along to crash particles. Why? We war over everything else, but we're not warring over this collider. We're not warring over the data and the information that's being discussed as it relates to this to the particles and this LHC. Something to think about. CERN is the site of the LHC, the world's largest and highest energy particle collider. Now there's that word energy, and I do believe I will do a teaching about energy, because even in New Age they've adopted the whole, if my energy doesn't whatever, or that's bad energy. But here in science, energy is actually a real thing. So, all right, let's see. So they primarily use this collider thing again to crash particles and to analyze data from experiments, as well as to stimulate events. So they create events. So you know how I like to make parallels with movies. So you know how in the Hunger Games, they thought that the whole time they were in that arena, that was actually what it was, but it was actually simulated events. They created the clouds, they created the rain, everything was false. They made it, and they made it as if it were real. This is something along the lines of what they're doing. They're simulating events with this collider. They're creating events. So a lot of earthquakes that we think are random, they're not random. They're simulated events. A lot of storms and hurricanes and things that come that we're like, wow, like how did that just come out the blue, or like the conditions just change, whatever. It's not random. They're simulated events. Volcanic eruptions that they're like, well, it's erupting before its time. It's not even supposed to erupt for another however many 100 years. They're simulating events. So when this collider is powered up and it's causing an effect on different events here in the earth. And we'll understand why, because we know that it's in a 17-mile facility, but the other part is that it's underground, and we'll get there. So researchers need remote access to these facilities. So catch this. I thought this was extremely interesting. The lab has historically been a major wide area network hub. CERN is also the birthplace of the World Wide Web. So the internet, what we're on now, they birthed it. So if CERN, and they birthed it for their own purpose. They birthed it to share information and data. So before it was even accessible to us, they had been using it. So I began to think, and I said, if it's true that they have been around since 1954, and they have created this World Wide Web, right? That we now, have access to, but they've been using it for years before it even got to us. Then why would they allow us to have access to the World Wide Web if they needed it to share their data? Because they developed something better. They gave us the little bit because they have something newer, some newer technology that they haven't released to us yet. You know what it's like? It's like an iPhone, right? So we might have like the iPhone XR, but they've already been working on they already have the new one. What's after the XR, y'all? Y'all can tell me. Let's say the 8. We got the iPhone 8, but they've been had the XR for about 5 years now, right? And by the time they figured out how to get what's after the XR, they was like, oh, well, they can have the XR now and upgrade from the 8. That's how it was with the World Wide Web. They had it for years. And by the time that they created something that's more advanced, they gave it to us. And we think we doing something because we got Google now, we got Yahoo, we can, research anything on the web, pretty much find anything. But now they have something more deeper. And I am of the persuasion that the dark web, the web that, a lot of people hack into and it's very hard to get access to, they created that too. And a lot of the stuff that is on there is from them. But they created www, the World Wide Web. So there are founding members of CERN. All right, so the founding members of CERN, there are 12. Belgium, Denmark, France, the Federal Republic of Germany, Greece, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and Yugoslavia. Now, the first thing I did, I looked to see if the United States was one, right? Like, where are we at with this? Like, they got this big old generator. They're studying, particles. We claim we got the smartest, most elite, in all areas. So why are we not a part of this founding member list? So I just, continued to study, and I found out that the United States does play a part, and we'll get to that in a second. So, scientific achievements. And a lot of this you can go online, you can find out already, but I wanted to give you guys the basic, the foundation. So, there's a whole bunch of them, whole bunch of scientific achievements, but the one that I wanted to focus in on was in 2012, a boson with mass around 125 GeV over C2 consistent with the long sort Higgs boson was discovered. So the Higgs boson is considered the God particle. They say that, oh, well, it's called the God particle because a scientist was like, it's GD time we figured out or found a particle that we could see. So they called it the God particle. But it extends far deeper than that. That's like the whole cover up type of explanation of why they named it the God particle. All right. Since the Higgs has the role to generate the mass of other particles, and the fact that dark matter, that's a key word, dark matter, can primarily be detected through its mass, the Higgs boson can be a unique portal to finding signs of dark matter. You know how we talk about portals and things of that nature? So into this 888 portal, let me tell y'all, portals are nothing to play with. They are out here trying to find a portal to bring in dark matter. Now you got matter. We're matter. We're made of matter. And if we're made of matter, and the dark is supposed to be like the antimatter is supposed to be the opposite of matter. It's the opposite of us, of how we are in this 3D realm. And antimatter is connected to dark matter. So therefore, dark matter, so far as we're going into this research, it does not sound very good now, does it? And the fact that you have to go through a portal to get it. So let's see. All right, so we talked about how CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. We talked about how it operates the world's largest particle physics lab and is an atom smasher to generate antimatter, which is invisible. So let's go back to when we talked about heavens, realms, and dimensions, right? So anytime you leave from the 3D dimension, this is where we are, 3D, things that we can see, we can touch, is tangible. And even going into the fourth dimension where you have time, what is happening? You are now entering into a spiritual realm. or spiritual dimension. So anything past the third dimension going into the fourth and above is a spiritual dimension. So if antimatter is invisible, it's not 3D and it cannot be seen, then what is it? This is how God was dealing with me as I was on the research. It is spiritual. Now we're digging into spiritual dimensions, trying to pull out different particles, different things in those dimensions and bring them here and make them 3D. All right. Let's see. In 2012, CERN scientists were able to trap antimatter and observe the Higgs Boson or God particle, which they believe would unlock the secrets of how the universe was created and support the Big Bang theory of how an invisible universe-wide field gave mass to all matter right after the Big Bang. If you've been riding with me, I've said this a lot of times. Science is literally the occult. They're trying to find a way to prove through science that God doesn't exist and that it wasn't just as simple as God was already here. He said, let there be, and there was. No, they're trying to validate their theory of the Big Bang theory, right? And how they're able to recreate it. So with this LHC, they're trying to recreate the Big Bang theory. They're trying to recreate how God created the earth, how God created us through science. And they're trying to use this antimatter, this God particle, in order to do it. Now, I hope I put this in my notes, but as we go a little further, I want you guys to know that CERN has also crossed over into the medical field. And they have been injecting individuals with different things that they have created in the lab. And we'll go down further. And all of this is on their World Wide Web. So you got to know that if they created the World Wide Web, they know everything that's on it, right? And if it was something that they didn't want on it, guess what they probably would have already done? Taken it down. So keeping that in mind. All right, let's go a little deeper. So CERN operates a network of 6 accelerators and a decelerator. Each machine in the chain increases the energy, there's that word again, of particle beams before delivering them to experiments on or to the next more powerful accelerator. Now I'm telling you guys this because you got to know what it is and how it works in the natural before we can even go into the whole spiritual aspect of it. So they literally have built these huge machines, and the machine looks like a portal. If you go online and you Google it, it's right there. They don't have a problem showing you what it is. You can go on their website. It's a big circle, and in the middle of the circle is another circle, and it's a whole bunch of. It looks like something out of Transformers when they were trying to. It was Megatron. He wanted them to build him a body or to do something like that. And that same machine that's in Transformers, that's what it looks like. So, all right. Many activities at CERN currently involve operating the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, and the experiments for it, and represents a large-scale worldwide scientific cooperation project. So when you hear a worldwide scientific cooperation project, that should raise your eyebrow. Yet again, we can't get along with so many other things, but worldwide we can come together and cooperate on this one project that involves something called a God particle, that involves dark matter, antimatter, and opening portals through collisions of particles in a accelerator and decelerator machine. Like, I don't even have to know physics to know that something going on. So let's keep going. Now, as I mentioned before, this LHC, this collider, All right, it's a 17-mile circumference. So that's like going in the circle. So a 17-mile circumference, but it is located 100 meters, which is I think a little less than a mile underground. So this whole facility is not even above ground. It is under the earth, y'all. I mean, it's underground. Um, in the region between Geneva International Airport and their nearby Jura, Jura mountains. And I just want to stress this. It's underground. It's not even above ground. They're not even trying to do this thing in outer space. They're trying to do this thing in an area in the earth. Yep, in the earth, underground, in a tunnel. And then we wonder why we have so many disruptions above ground. All right, we're gonna find out some more. All right, the majority of its length is on the French side of the border. It uses the 27 kilometers to 16.77, or rounded up 17 miles circumference circle tunnel, previously occupied by the Large Electron Positron Collider, which was shut down in November of 2000. So they had a collider before that they were trying to use. They shut that down and they built another one. And they're actually in the process of building an even larger one because they need more space and a larger machine to create more energy for more impact so that they can experiment it. So they have 8 experiments going on right now. I apologize. I thought it was 6. They have 8 experiments going on right now. Each of them studies particle collisions from a different aspect and with different technologies. Construction for these experiments required an extraordinary engineering effort. So, for example, they had to order us or make a special crane. Well, no, they rent it from Belgium to lower the pieces of one of the detectors into its cavern. And each piece weighed nearly 2,000 tons. So this gives you an idea. This is some heavy machinery. They got to rent cranes. Each piece weighed 2,000 tons. And I'm seeing more and more of this whole Transformer movie. That might be our next movie that we watch together. To create just a portion of the machine. And then keep in mind, it spans over the circumference of 17 miles. So think of a circle in the middle, from the middle point in all directions is 17 miles. That's pretty wide and large. So let's see. On March 30th, 2010, the LHC successfully collided into 2 proton beams, resulting in 70 eV collision energy. However, this was just the start of what we needed for the expected discovery of the Higgs boson. Higgs boson, one of the universe's fundamental particles. So again, they're trying to break everything down to the point of where it first began. So they're taking all the particles apart to get to the very beginning of the particle. So to get to the very beginning of the particle, ultimately what they're trying to do is, again, they're trying to figure out existence, the creation. They're trying to figure out what God already said. By his word he created, but they're not taking him at his word. They're trying to make science explain it, and they have not figured it out, but they're experimenting to try. Now, in the middle of all those experiments, they're creating a bigger thing than, to be honest with you, I believe they already realized the bigger thing than what they initially, came into it for. And at this point, it's no turning back. And we'll understand a little bit more soon. All right. So in July of 2012, they discovered a subatomic particle that was later confirmed to be the Higgs boson. So they confirmed it in July of 2012. a new subatomic particle. And I thought the subatomic was interesting because you ever thought about the atomic bomb? You know how we're supposed to have the atomic bomb? What's in it? I'm going to dare to tell you guys, if you research the ingredients of the atomic bomb, they have, based off of their exactly matter and energy, based off of their experiments and research, they have gathered, and it doesn't even take a handful, it doesn't take a lot. They have gathered enough of the antimatter, because the more antimatter you have, the more powerful of a weapon and explosion you can create. It encases small amounts of antimatter, dark matter within those bombs. You can research the ingredients is on the web. So now I found this interesting. You know how we had those 12 founding countries that came together and founded this organization, and then it's like 23 whatever was said earlier that was like a part of the whole ratified agreement of it. So we have 3 countries that have observer status. Remember when I was trying to figure out, well, where's the US in all of this? Well, Japan has an observer status, meaning they can observe. They rather observe instead of send their scientists over. Um, since 1995, Russia, aren't we already having issues with Russia? Don't Japan and Russia both claim that they have weaponry that is so powerful, that is even more powerful than the United States? And if we dare come for them, they don't have a problem tomorrow dropping it on us. Okay. Russia since 1993 and the United States since 1997. So they have observer status. And if you really do your research and search for articles, you'll see that they have been trying to create and do their own science outside of what Cern is already doing, because everybody wants to be the first at everything, right? So they want to be the first and the most powerful. All right. Now, as I mentioned, CERN is proposing to build an even bigger super collider in search of the God particle, because they still have to break down. They discovered the Higgs boson, or the boson Higgs, but now they need to break that down. They're trying to get to figure out, like, what is the glue to it all? What is keeping it all together? How can we get it to the point where there's nothing that needs to be kept together? Everything is just independent within itself. So they're still trying to find the God particle in its original form. However, some scientists have been cautioning against this move, fearing it would open up a black hole or a parallel universe. So let's go back. I told you all of it actually intertwined. So I began to realize, like, God, like, I didn't understand why you said to teach it in a certain way, but I get it now. Because if we would have learned this first, it wouldn't have made as much sense, considering that we hadn't learned about the heavens, the dimensions, and the realms. But if we look at it now based off of what we were introduced to in that teaching, we talked about different dimensions housing different realities, right? So they're trying to get to different dimensions, right? Which they're considering parallel universes, right? So with a parallel universe, not only would they be able to tap into future events, right? Normally with parallel universes, it's like one is working backwards while one is working forwards. But who does that? God. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the author and the finisher of your faith. He knows your beginning, and he says you have an expected end. So to access a parallel universe, what you're trying to do is access what's coming, as opposed to where you are now. And then on their end, they see what's coming as opposed to what has already happened where we are. Like, it's like it works backwards. So they're trying to manipulate time. It's like You know, we see the movies about time travelers or jumpers, people who can, use energy and all that stuff to begin to jump from one reality to the other reality, as well as bend time to conform to whatever they need to do, whether go forward or go backwards. All of that happens in those spiritual dimensions. Black hole. I've heard black hole for a long time, and I never really paid it much attention, to be honest with you. And it's funny how oblivious we can be to just the stuff that they put right before our faces. They put it right in the newspaper. You'll read the articles about what's going on, about who got murdered down the street, and like 3 articles down, you hear, "Oh, a new black hole was discovered." You kind of skip over that because it's like black hole. A black hole is an opening into another dimension. It is a portal. It is Star Trek kind of stuff. So all these shows, all these movies, Star Trek, again, the Avengers, all that stuff. Again, movies are not just movies. They're putting it right in front of our face, so we can't say, "Oh, we didn't know," when stuff begins to transpire. Just like with the corona, they literally did a movie about a virus like the coronavirus, and what hit like 10 years later, the coronavirus. So I no longer take movies or TV just as entertainment no more. It is exactly what it says it is. It's programming. So think about that. Let's go a little deeper into black holes and portals. All right. So on June 16th, 2016, Cern began the Advanced Wake Field Experiment. That's the acronym. Project to accelerate charged particles. And coincidentally, 10 days later, photographer Christopher Suarez, and I want to thank Erin for sending me a couple articles in her research because I did incorporate them. So thank you. Christoph Suarez put online series of photos of the skies above CERN. Now, don't forget, CERN is where? Underground. So they began a project and stuff began to happen in the sky. The photo showed a strange cloud formation and electrical activities above the CERN complex. I don't know if y'all watched the series Manifest on Netflix, but that would be another one that would like really give you some insight, because they were experimenting on this thing, trying to figure out what it was composed of, and it was in this accelerator. And at one point when they were experimenting on it, there was a dark cloud above the facility that they were doing the experiment. Again, they put everything in the movies. And it was a government facility comparable to what Cern is. It's Manifest on Netflix. So the photo showed a strange cloud formation and electrical activity above the CERN complex, and this stirred a bit of a media frenzy about portals in the sky. In light of the fact that LHC, the collider, has detected many MINI black holes while smashing the particles that could indicate parallel universes and extra dimensions. So remember, we talked about you have a dimension, but in the dimension, you can also have other dimensions in that dimension. Yes, Miss Lucy, they are definitely trying to do that. They try and bring forth the fallen angel. She's right, and we're going to get there. So the main worry is the creation of these microscopic black holes that would grow. So you ever seen the movies where they had a portal and the portal started off small, but then all of a sudden, like the wind was blowing and it was making the little circle. And next thing you know, things started to grow and it get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the worry is that in all these experiments and all the stuff, that the side effects of what they're doing in the atmosphere, that these microscopic holes will begin to grow into bigger holes. Think about that. So, in the meantime, while scientists are concerned with black holes and decay of the universe, others, from a religious standpoint, and there are a lot of religious videos out there, are wary of CERN's efforts to investigate extra dimensions and parallel universe through the collider. Here, science meets religion in the search of the God particle. The religious community is generally suspicious of CERN's activities and questions what does the statue. So here we go. Now let's talk about the facilities. In the front of the facilities is a statue image of a Hindu god called Lord Shiva. The picture is on the net. All you got to do is Google it right in front of it. It's a circle and it's the little guy with all them arms and legs and stuff, right? And this Hindu god is the god, the little g, of destruction. This is in front of the facility. It is prominently displayed outside of the collider and has to do with science, as they say, right? Now, peep this. Also note, CERN is located in a place which was once called Apollicum. Apolliacum. Probably said it wrong, but guess what? It means Apollyon. Where have we heard Apollyon? In Revelations. In Greek, which means destruction. In Roman times, where they believed was a gateway to the underworld. So, CERN is located at a place that was once called Apollyon. It is a big accelerator, decelerator machine that looks like a portal and is trying to open up portals. And in front of the building is an idol. The god, the Hindu god, little g, Lord Shiva, the god of destruction. That right there should raise an eyebrow. Let's go further. All right, given that scientists refer to black holes as bottomless pits of gravity, where else have we heard bottomless pits? Who was going to be thrown into the bottomless pit? Satan and all his fellow cohorts, right? All right. And coupled with discussion of opening a doorway into another dimension, many point to warnings in the book of Revelations. Revelations chapter 9, verses 1 to 3. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. And you can complete your reading of that. All right. So this reference a point in time when Satan is given the key to the bottomless pit to release a horde of demonic beings resembling locusts upon the world. And, there are people who are wondering if the experiments that CERN is doing is going to play a part in that portal opening and play a part in the end times. Now, let's see. China is also joining the quest and building its own particle smasher 5 times more powerful than CERN's LHC, than their collider. And as Europe and China both race in search of the God particle, it may not be long before we all find out pretty much what's on the other side of the portal. All right. Now, I got to break down antimatter because we talked about, so you know about the collider now, right? You know about CERN, you know about the experiments. Now let's break down antimatter because this is what they're concerned with, right? So when matter and antimatter come into contact, they annihilate, disappearing in a flash of energy. The Big Bang should have created equal amounts of matter and antimatter. So why is there far more matter than antimatter in the universe? This is what the scientists are trying to figure out. Like if the Big Bang Theory, as they came up with, meant that when they collided, everything should have been equally split between matter and antimatter. Why do you have more matter, as in us, the things that we're seeing? Then we have this antimatter in the universe. All right, so we can't just go out and find antimatter. In order to study antimatter, they have to make it. So let's get into what antimatter is a little bit more. So, in the intense heat of this Big Bang, particles of matter were forged out of pure energy. There goes that word energy again. But for every particle of matter created, a twin was born, an antiparticle. So I did a teaching, we talked about how, like, for everything, there's a polar opposite. So if you have Satan, then there must be a God. And if Satan is darkness, then there must be light. So they come to the same conclusion that for everything, there has to be an opposite. So if we have matter, then there must be antimatter, right? So for the first few instants of its existence, the universe was balanced, with matter and antimatter created in equal abundance. So they're trying to say that, when we read in Genesis that the earth was void and there was nothing on it, there was an equal balance of matter and antimatter, right? All before things were formed and shaped by the word of God. So then just 1 second after this Big Bang, and for me, the Big Bang is God said and there was. Boom, bang, bada boom, bada bang. Hey, God said and there was. There's your bang. So they're looking for something extra. The antimatter had all but disappeared together with almost all the matter, leaving a minute amount of matter alone to form everything that we see around us, from the stars and the galaxy into the earth and all that supports it. So their concern is this. They're saying with this Big Bang, like, there should be more antimatter around, but they're seeing more matter and more that was made out of the little bit of what they considered the minute amount of matter that was left to form everything that we see today. Hold on 1 second, y'all. Sorry. That was my door. I had to get my door. All right. So they're trying to figure out, okay, well, where's the antimatter? All I'm seeing is a lot of matter. And I need to see the polar opposite of it. So our world is made of matter, which consists of 3 types of particles called electrons, protons, and neutrons. Each particle has a specific mass and electric charge. And antimatter particles have the same mass as the particles that make up our world, but they carry the opposite charge. So, if, for instance, this matter, us, we can be seen and we're being charged by light. Let's put it like that in those instances, right? With antimatter, right? The thing about it is it would have the opposite charge. So that means it would be darkness. So you wouldn't be able to see anything. That's just an example. All right. Particles and antiparticles go together. Imagine sitting on a sandy beach. When you dig a hole, you also create a pile of sand. One cannot be made without making the other. They are complementary, just like particles and antiparticles. Antimatter and matter were created in equal amounts in this Big Bang, as the scientists consider, but we don't see antimatter around us today. So they're confused because it's not making sense. The Bible says that God will use the little things to confound the wise. So they sitting here picking their brain over, like, how come if I dig a hole in sand, I can see, the pound of sand over there and the hole, but we made a matter, but I can't see antimatter. Now they picking their brains apart, trying to figure out something that is a mystery because God just did it. All right. When antiparticles and particles meet, they destroy each other. The process called annihilation liberates all the energy that is stored in their mass. When antiparticles and particles meet, they destroy each other. So when there is a connection between the antiparticle and the particle, it is destroyed. And all the energy that was housed in both is now released into the atmosphere. Annihilation can create gamma rays or even new particle antiparticle pairs. So it's just like with this mutating virus, right? So when they come together and it annihilates, it can create even new particles when all the energy is dispersed. All right, all of this matters because it they are sitting there day and night picking their brains trying to figure this thing out, right? And it's not just for a paycheck. Like there's something more to it. Anytime you would live underground in a facility, right, that has a huge um machine in it that runs off of energy um to dissect a particle, you got to think about, well, what's the more? Like they have to know something to make them that persistent in these experiments, right? So we don't find antimatter around us. In order to study antimatter, again, it has to be made. So when enough energy is squeezed into a small space, such as doing a high energy particle collision, what they're doing in the collider, a particle antiparticle pairs are produced spontaneously. The energy given to the accelerated particles has to be at least equivalent to the mass of the new particles in order for this to occur. The more energy that is put into the particle collisions, the more massive the particle and antiparticles that can be created. So the whole goal is to get this accelerator thing to move so fast and at such power that with the collision, they can create bigger and more of these particles and these antiparticles. When energy transforms into mass, both matter and antimatter are created in equal amounts. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to do these collisions, right? At high speed with high energy with high power to create an equal amount of matter and antimatter. And the ultimate goal is to get to the antimatter, the dark matter. Antimatter is produced in many experiments at Cern. So they are able to produce antimatter. They have antimatter and they store antimatter. Um, in the collisions at the collider, the antiparticles that are produced cannot be trapped because of their very high energy. So because these particles, right, have such high energy, it's hard to trap them. So when you think about high energy, right, just even now in us talk, you know, they'd be like, oh, that person got a lot of energy. They can't sit still. They bouncing all across the walls, blah, blah, blah. To me, that means a lot of movement. I'm seeing a lot of spiritual movement, a lot of activity. So you got spirits that are moving quicker than a flash of light, right? And now you're trying to capture a spirit, but it has such high energy that you can't contain it in just something that's just natural. You have to create something to contain it in. That's witchcraft. That is literally witchcraft. There are witches and warlocks out there. And I had a witch tell me, she was like, I went and, you know, I did this cleansing at this house or whatever, and I captured this spirit in a box. They capture spirits in boxes. You got to be careful of jewelry. They can capture spirits in jewelry and stones, crystals and stuff, certain crystals. They capture spirits in. So there's a way to trap these spirits, right? But they have such high dream catchers. Come on. Y'all getting it? They have such high energy that just in the natural realm with a natural thing, it's not powerful enough. So they've been creating these machines powerful enough to be able to capture this dark matter, this high energy moving particle. Remove particle and say spirit, because words are what? Spirit. So when God said, let there be, and he spoke, those spirits begin to transform and form into 3D. So that particle that they're trying to catch is a spirit, so that they can form and transform it to recreate what they consider the creation. All right. Now, let's go here. Yeah, Joshua on it, especially with, and I don't even watch Ghostbusters like that. I could never finish the full movie. So, as a human being, right? We are made of matter, but we do have small amounts of antimatter within us. So, again, if we look at it like this, if matter, the 3D part, right? The light, right? What we can see, right? Antimatter, invisible, and darkness. Hold that thought, because when we get more into the biblical verses of it all, it's going to make sense, because I was just like, oh Lord. All right, let's go. Now, to make this stuff, do y'all know how much money it costs to make this stuff? Billions of dollars. We sitting here talking about the debt ceiling and and China and all this other stuff, but we're putting billions of dollars into a machine to study particles. You know that wars are not just wars. Wars are over different natural resources that they need to power things like this. Y'all do know that, right? So, like in Wakanda, and they, was trying to get the titanium or whatever that was, that natural resource, because with that, when they put it into their little machine, they had all this power and access to this high level weapon with it. Y'all do know that is real, right? That a lot of the weaponry that we have, the chemical weaponry that we have, the forceful outside of the guns and stuff like that, is ran on these gems and these minerals and these natural resources. And the war is really over their ability to, have access to these natural resources. I'm gonna just let y'all sit there with that. And Joshua got some good stuff in the chat. Now, let's talk about how they trap antimatter. In order to study antimatter, again, it has to be kept separate from matter, because what happens when you have antimatter and matter in the same area? They collide and it's an explosion to prevent it from annihilating. So electrically charged antimatter can be trapped in a device called a pinning trap, PENNING trap. The pinning trap requires an ultra high vacuum. Sounds like a movie. Sounds like a movie I've seen before. An ultra high vacuum. Oh yeah, so you know how, like, even in like the Avengers and even in some other movies, when they out there and they open up the door and they get suctioned out, like, because there's no gravity, like they get suctioned out into outer space. That's what it reminds me of. So, an ultra high vacuum. Inside the trap, magnetic fields force the charged antiparticles to spiral around the magnetic field lines, and electric fields confine them along the magnetic axis. In June 2011, in the Alpha experiment on Cern, they reported that it had succeeded in trapping antimatter atoms for over 16 minutes, long enough to begin to study their properties in detail. How many of you know that any information that they tell you that they've done, if they say 16 minutes, I'll give it hours. They're not going to give you the full details and the full truth behind anything. And just the visual that I was getting when I read that to you about the magnetic fields force the charged antiparticles to spiral around the magnetic field lines, and the electric fields confine them along the magnetic axes. What I literally saw in the spirit was, how they do the circle with the Star of David in the middle with the salt for the witchcraft and for ceremonies. That's the visual that I literally got as I was reading that circle, that witchcraft circle where they have the Star of David. The priests and the Catholics, they be throwing water, or they say if you put the demon in the middle of the circle with the sword around it, it can't come out and mess with you. Pentagram. Okay, there you go. Witchcraft. Trying to tell y'all. All right. Now, finding what holds it all together is the God particle. Now we're going to go into some biblical basis, right? So I'm gonna give you a little rehash, and then I'm gonna read the chat later. So Cern is a 17-mile wide facility in Switzerland, as we know. They're taking matter, the smallest particle, the building block of everything, and they're shooting it at the speed of light through the magnetic field in the circle. So don't find it a coincidence that there's a whole circle that they made. They could have made a square. They could have made a triangle. They made a circle, okay? And they have this thing in the center of the circle. Lord, it's just coming to me as we talking. Have mercy on us, Father. So they're shooting it at the speed of light through the magnetic field in the circle because they are trying to go into another dimension. They're looking to create something to bend time and space. At full capacity, the machine releases antimatter. We are matter. Antimatter is the opposite. Matter would be like light. Antimatter would be like darkness. This machine allows them to collect darkness. You ever tried to grab light and hold light in your hands? You ever tried to hold darkness in your hands? This machine is giving them the ability to collect darkness. They gather it from the place that is on the other side of the dimension. What they have found in their studies is that there is a wall, a veil that is holding something back. And holding back this antimatter or this darkness from coming from where it is to where we are. So they're trying to find the building blocks of that wall so they can dismantle it, so that whatever is on the other side that's being held back can come through. Now, matter. Matter is the substance that constitutes the observable universe, and together with energy forms the basis of all objective phenomena. So energy obviously plays a big part in the spiritual realm and in the natural realm. So we will table energy, and we will do a room dedicated to energy. Now, depending on temperature and other conditions, matter may appear in any of several states. At ordinary temperatures, for instance, gold is a solid, water is a liquid, and nitron is a gas. Solids hold their shape, liquids take on the shape of others, and gas can fill an entire container. That's just the basics of what matter is. I know I have forgot for a while until I did this research again, because I don't really have to put it in practice. Antimatter annihilations have the potential to release a huge amount of energy. A gram of antimatter can produce an explosion the size of a nuclear bomb. So we have a nuclear bomb, and a gram of antimatter can create an explosion the size of a nuclear bomb. What do you think is in a nuclear bomb? So they have taken this antimatter and they have weaponized it. However, so they say that humans have only produced a minuscule amount of antimatter, but Do we believe that, or are we going to wait for the truth to come out later? I would say that over all of these years, they have enough to do the damage that they have been doing, and it's plenty. Now, all right. Now, this was a part of an article. Um, I don't see why it wouldn't be true, but again, this will be third party information. So, again, run it by your Holy Ghost to do your information. So there was an article that was talking about how when scientists learned how to house antimatter, they stored it at a college, a university, right? And on the campus of the university where it was stored, strange things begin to happen. People begin to have hallucinations. People begin to see different like paranormal activity. The weather in that area begin to shift. Different things just begin to be off. Now, if we are coming to the conclusion that antimatter or dark matter, right, is something that is completely opposite and contrary to what matter is, right? And matter is, again, 3D, what we're seeing, what we're composed of, then that would be a clear indication for me that if spiritual activity started to go on where the antimatter was housed, that the antimatter is attached to spiritual things. It's not just a worldly concept. And if we're tapping into a spiritual dimension and creating small portals and black holes in order to get it, it comes attached with a spirit. And if it's anti or dark, I'm going to say it's demonic because God is light. And if we're not able to capture light, come on now. We're not able to capture light, but we can capture darkness. Something to think about. All right, let's go. All right. Antimatter, these are some facts about antimatter. It's closer to you than you think. Small amounts of antimatter constantly rain down on the earth in the form of cosmic rays, energetic particles from space. The antimatter particles reach our atmosphere at a rate ranging from less than 1 per square meter to more than 100 square meters. Scientists have also seen evidence of antimatter production above thunderstorms. So again, we're dealing with stuff that is where, that is housed where? In the firmaments, in the first heaven. So if they're able to see antimatter, right? Traces of antimatter in that area where thunderstorms and above thunderstorms, that's in the first heaven. And what did we discuss about the first heaven? In the first heaven, there's both activity from the kingdom of God and the kingdom of darkness, because it's an area of travel from the second and the third to where we are here on this earth. And earth is not heaven. We discussed that in that first teaching. Humans have created only a tiny amount of antimatter, but we've talked about how I don't believe that. Here we go. Antimatter is used in medicine. PET, positron emissions tomography, uses positrons to produce high-resolution images of the body. Positron emitting radioactive isotopes like the ones found in bananas are attached to chemical substances such as glucose that are used naturally by the body. These are injected into the bloodstream where they are naturally broken down, releasing positrons that meet electrons in the body and annihilate. The annihilations produce gamma rays that are used to construct images. Antimatter is used in medicine. So, when you go to the doctors and they've been they start prescribing pills or say they want to run certain tests on certain machines, run it by your Holy Ghost, okay? Because they are injecting antimatter into bloodstreams. And if antimatter is connected to this quote unquote God particle that they're trying to break down to see how existences was created, I'm gonna let y'all think about that. Some things I gotta let y'all say loud on. Now, scientists on CERN's ACE project have studied antimatter as a potential candidate for cancer therapy. Physicians have already discovered that they can target tumors with beams of particles that will release their energy only after safely passing through healthy tissue, using antiprotons as an extra burst of energy. The technique was found to be effective in hamster shells, but researchers have yet to conduct studies in human cells. They are working on being able to treat cancer with antimatter. And if you don't already know, I can tell you this now. And there are a lot of people, love to hear the testimony of converted witches and this, that, and third. And one of the things that they have always, a lot of them have attributed to demonic spirits is cancer. When they were being punished by these spirits for not doing what they wanted them to do, guess what? They gave them cancer. All right, hold on one second. I'm at 7%, and I gotta plug my computer up, but we're almost to the end. Thank y'all for your patience. My phone, my computer is fully charged. Almost said I'm at 7%. We gonna get through this now. Scientists have discovered an invisible shield roughly 7,200 miles above Earth that blocks so-called killer electrons, which can fry satellites and degrade space systems during intense solar storms. So there's an invisible shield above Earth. The first thing I thought about was a veil. Why would Earth need a shield? What is this shield protecting or keeping us from, or keeping from coming into Earth? Why would it have the ability to fry and kill different particles or different spirits from having access to Earth? So, the latest mystery revolves around an extremely sharp boundary at the inner edge of the outer belt at roughly 7,200 miles in altitude that appears to block the ultra-fast electrons from breaching the shield and moving deeper towards Earth's atmosphere. It's almost like these electrons are running into a glass wall in space. What is space? The second heaven. And then what's above the second heaven? The third heaven. I'm gonna let y'all think about that. Somewhat like the shields created by force fields on Star Trek, that were used to repel alien weapons. We are seeing an invisible shield blocking these electrons. It's a extremely puzzling phenomenon. Now, all these questions begin to pop into my head. Now y'all are going to go through my train of thought with me, because this is how God deals with me. So there's an invisible shield around the Earth. I'm thinking a veil. Okay. So we have the Earth. the firmament, which is the first heaven, the second heaven, and the third heaven. So here's the question that arose. I said, how were we able to see spirits and angels before the flood then? We don't see them like that now, right? So there was no veil. There was nothing that was keeping the dimensions and the realms from blending. How do I know? Because in Genesis chapter 6, we learned with the Nephilim, right, that the angels came down, created children, took wives, and they began to teach them all forms of wickedness. How were they able to procreate with the angels? How were they able to see the angels? If there was something that was keeping them or keeping us from even seeing them in a 3D form. So obviously there was a blending of dimensions and realms, whereas one could go into the other and be seen and be able to interact without issue. So then I was like, all right, well, could they see it after the flood? Like, could they see the angels and stuff? Was there still a blending of realms after the flood? So God took me to Genesis 18. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. And Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance to his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. Verse 3, he said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "grab 3 shades, SEAHS, of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to a servant, who hurried to prepare it. He then bought some curds of milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them while they ate. He stood near them under a tree. "Where's your wife?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. I'm reading all this for a reason. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." That's going to be some of y'all. By this time next year, y'all going to be knocked up, pregnant, or having a baby. All right. Now, Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "Am I worn out? After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Why did I read all of that? Because of the 3 people that were there, one of them was the Lord. Why does that matter? Because we're trying to decide when, in fact, did the realms and the dimensions stop blending to the point where, as in order for us to be able to see into the spiritual realm, God has to open up our eyes, when all throughout the beginning of the Bible, they were able to pass through without any barriers. But now we have a glass shield, a glass-like shield above the earth, right? That would seem to be keeping the second heaven from really flowing through, right, down to the earth realm. All right. Now, God gave me another instance. He said, go to Genesis chapter 9. So I went to Genesis chapter 9. "The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. 'My lords,' he said." Also, angels can be lords, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So when you're doing your hierarchy of who is what, angels can be lords. So they're heavenly lords. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning. No, they answered, we will spend the night in the square. Here we go. But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Now, before I go further, I'm going to say, just from this scripture, you can probably say, well, the realms weren't no longer blended then, because, maybe it was just that Lot saw it himself. You know what I mean? Because Daniel, when the angel came, it was just Daniel, and the vision was just with him and the angel. But then we go to verse 4. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. If they were able to see the angels as men, guess what? The realms and the dimensions were still blended. There was still a way whereas angels and and spirits of that nature were able to come into the natural realm of earth, and it was a normal occurrence. They knew they could see them and all of that stuff. So then again, now it's like, all right, so we're in Genesis, we're in Sodom, and the realms are still blended. So I'm like, okay, so when was the veil put up so that it would not be blended? When was the veil put up? Whereas now we have this thing where we got to build a machine in order to have access to something that normally in the Old Testament around Genesis, it was an everyday occurrence. Now, I tried to figure it out by being like, okay, so where did we get to the point where now it wasn't blended anymore? And God led me to 2 Kings. And Abraham, and Elisha. So let's go to 2 Kings chapter 6, starting in verse 15. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and had gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? He answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elijah prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man and saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. So I'm like, somewhere between Abraham and Elisha, something happened that we no longer had blended realms and dimensions, where earth was earth, and in order to be able to see and interact in 3D with a spiritual realm, God had to open up your eyes. So I went back on the search. So I'm like, well, what is that thing, right? Like, what is that thing that happened? And that's when God led me to Nimrod. And Nimrod is spoken about in Genesis. Hold on. I got my place marker, I got my Bible. So Nimrod is mentioned in Genesis chapter 10. And then it goes into, I do believe it's chapter 10. If I'm wrong, don't shoot me and call me a false prophet, a false teacher. You can just Google it. And then chapter 11 is very important because it talks about the Tower of Babel. Now, that would lead us into, now we're not going to go into it tonight. I'm going to do a whole teaching about Nimrod, but this is to plant the seed for you guys to study. So I introduce you to the book of Enoch and with the Nephilim. I'm going to introduce you to the book of Jasher. The book of Jasher. And we're going to do a whole study of Nimrod. And I'm going to tell you that during the time of Nimrod and with the whole Tower of Babel, that is when we begin to see that God began to make it harder for man to be able to access things in the spiritual realm outside of him. So Joshua mentioned them in the book. Okay, cool, cool. Yep. Oh, Lucy, you on it. Go ahead now. So next, y'all know I ask questions. I said, well, what is keeping us from seeing or blending the realms now? Like, what veil was broken in the New Testament? You know how when Christ was on the cross, he said that, and the veil was rent, right? So, what veil was that? Like, why can't we see now? Like, why isn't it blended now as it was then if the veil was rent? So, and I'm coming up to the end, y'all, if y'all have questions. So, something happened in the temple in the very moment that Christ died on the cross. Mark 15:37-38 tells us when he died, Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last breath. And the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Matthew 27:51 is another comparable scripture. And Luke says the veil of the temple was torn in two. Luke 23:45. The act was complete the moment Jesus died. The veil was rent, telling us in a symbolic way that the entrance into God was now open and that it required nothing short of the death of Christ. Right? So, this is where it comes into play where I'm asking God for the more. Because everything that I gave you up until this point about the questions that I asked, you can find in any of these YouTube videos. Preachers have preached on Cern, so on and so forth. But I have not heard them necessarily preach about when the veil came into place, why we can't see like they saw, like when did the blending of the realms begin and when did it end. Now, as it comes to Cern, and this is how God has given it to me for this teaching. The goal is to break the veil for everything to have access across realms and heavens and blend in with earth. A portal, an opening. Light versus darkness, antimatter. Sin is darkness. We are all born with a measure of darkness, with a measure of antimatter. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin that my mother conceived me. That is Psalms 51:5 in the KJV version. If you read it in another version, surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. From the New Living Translation version, for I was born a sinner. Yes, from the moment my mother conceived me. Ecclesiastes 7:20, KJV. For there is not a just man upon the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. We were born with a sin nature. We are matter, right? We are composed of matter. That is how we can be seen in this existence. But that antimatter that we all have that little bit of is that sin nature that we were born with. And depending upon how we choose to live this life and the decisions that we make and the things that we partake in depends on how it grows or how it dies. What happens when matter collides with antimatter? What happens when the light collides with the darkness? It explodes, right? So, when the veil was rent, those who came under the covenant now have access to God. Those who didn't, don't. So the reason why, for those who are under the covenant, for those who are believers, have the Holy Spirit, and are able to see in the spiritual realm, that is the veil that was torn. So that now we can see spiritual things. Not everybody who has accepted Christ may feel like they can see in the spiritual realm. And that is because you have not necessarily tapped into the fullness of the work that was done on the cross, because you have the ability and access to do that. Those who have not come under the covenant They don't have the access like we do to see across realms and dimensions. So, what's happening? They are trying to find a way around the cross to access and blend the realms and make them all 3D and not just spiritually unseen. You know how we talked about science is just really witchcraft and the occult? What is witchcraft? Manipulating the will, manipulating things, right? They're trying to manipulate particles, matter, energy, time, all of that stuff, and find a way without having to acknowledge and to come under covenant and to accept the work that was done on the cross. They're trying to find a way around that in order to access spiritual things. And the way that they're trying to do it is through the kingdom of darkness, antimatter, dark matter. Cern is a collaborative effort across nations to open portals and gather antimatter that can be used as a weapon, but that is also attached to spirits in other dimensions. So listen, this is where these other teachings come into play. And I got so excited when God began to open this up for me, right? So he was like, remember when we did the teaching about the Nephilim? Who were their fathers? The fallen, disobedient angels, some of which have been cast where? Into outer darkness. The other side of the hole. So, bind, and this is from the book of Enoch, bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudadel, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. Now, 2 Peter 2:4. This is all from that last teaching. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Now, the last sentence about Azazel and Enoch says, and on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. That day of the great judgment hasn't happened yet, y'all. So they're trying to access something on the other side, right, of this portal in outer darkness. What's out there? But some bound up fallen angels. Okay. I'm going to give y'all some more. We're going back to the book of Enoch based off of our Nephilim teaching. I'm sorry, my knee hurt. And the Lord said unto Michael, go bind some Jaza and his associates who have united themselves with women. These are the ones who slept, the spirit spouses who slept with the women that had the Nephilim, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, so you know the Nephilim, they turn on each other and slayed each other, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them, remember we talked about this, fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth. What is in the valley? When you go deep into a valley, the deeper you go, the less what there is, the less light there is, right? So to the day of their judgment and of their consummation, to the judgment that is forever and ever consummated. So their day of judgment has not happened yet. They have been bound up for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth. So who do you think would have a keen interest in being able to have, because they've been cast down to the earth. They don't have the ability now to go into any other heavens, right? So who do you think will have a reason to have an interest in getting to the outer darkness and accessing those who have been cast into the outer darkness? Finding a way through our technology to open up a portal. This sounds like a whole movie, doesn't it? But this is actually the word of God. So they took the word of God and made it a movie so that you wouldn't believe it. And then they took some books out of the Bible, right, and hid them So that way, by the time they got uncovered, you wouldn't put two and two together, because you won't believe that this is the Bible, and then you won't believe that that's anything more than just a movie. But all of this is in the Bible. And all the books that I just referenced have been referenced in the Bible, from the book of Enoch to the book of Jasher. All right now. So it's not, so the Nephilim are already here on this earth. So it's not to release the Nephilim, it's to release their fathers, the fallen angels. All right. So this goes into Revelations. So when we begin to think about portals and stuff, I want you to consider the seven seals. I'm going to read them to you. Revelation 6:2, the first seal. The first seal introduces the Antichrist onto the scene as a rider of a white horse. This rider wears a crown and will deceive many with talks of peace, but he will wage war against the saints. So for every portal that is being opened, something's coming out that portal, right? I'm challenging your thinking to think past what we've been taught in church and to ask God for the deeper. Second seal, despite the promises of peace from the Antichrist, warfare will break out after this seal breaks. A red rider on a horse slays a great number of people. Where are these days coming from? Where is this red rider just appearing out of the blue from? Did he fall from heaven? Or was there an opening made with the collaboration of the wickedness of men? Think about it. Fourth seal, Revelation 6:7-8. Death, riding upon a pale horse, wipes out 1/4 of the earth. Many have attributed the events of the second through fourth seals to the great wars, famines, and bubonic plague, which wiped out good portions of Europe in the 14th century. The fifth seal, Revelation 6:9. Those martyred will ask God how long until he judges the earth. They are told a little while longer and given a white robe. Now, I want y'all to look at this, right? Oh, this is going to be another teach I'm going to do. I'm going to teach about the body, the spirit, and the soul. Y'all need to understand more about that. Because if they've been martyred, how are they able to ask God how long until he judges the earth? What is speaking? Is it their soul speaking or their spirit? I want y'all to think about that. The sixth seal, Revelations chapter 6, 12-14. Catastrophic natural events take place from a rattling earthquake, the sun turning black, the moon turning blood red, and mountains and islands disappearing. The seventh seal, Revelations 8:1. Silence fills heaven, reminiscent of the Sabbath day of rest God took on the seventh day after creation. A brief pause occurs before the following judgments. Now, then you got the trumpets. The angels sound 7 trumpets. The next set of judgment, the first trumpet, Revelations 8:7. Hail, fire, and blood will rain down on the earth and wipe out 1/3 of all plant life. The second trumpet, Revelations 8:8. A burning mountain falls into the sea, turns 1/3 of the ocean to blood, and 1/3 of all sea life dies. Revelations 8:10. A third trumpet, a star called wormwood. I heard that today. A star called wormwood poisons 1/3 of all the fresh water supply. Revelations 8:12. The fourth trumpet, 1/3 of the moon, star, and sun darkens. Revelations 9:3-11. The fifth trumpet, demon locusts with human faces, long hair, lion's teeth, and the power of a scorpion sting, plague and sting non-believers for 5 months. Those who are stung will wish for death. Revelations 9:12-18, the sixth trumpet. 4 fallen angels. The sixth trumpet, Revelations 9:12-18. 4 fallen angels are released. 4 fallen angels are released and wipe out people from sulfur and fire pouring out of their mouths. They managed to wipe out 1/3 of mankind. What is released? Where are they released from, y'all? All right. Revelations 11:15, the seventh trumpet. Another break from the plagues and on to the seven bowls of judgment. 24 elders in heaven declare it's time to destroy those who destroy the earth. The temple in heaven opens, featuring the Ark of the Covenant. That is Cern. That is what God gave me concerning Cern. It, to me, it goes hand in hand with Revelations. I am still putting together the in between the Sodom and Gomorrah and Elisha having got praying to God for the servants' eyes to be open to be able to show you guys how during the time of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, that's when, that veil, that invisible shield to keep man from thinking that he can ascend high like the enemy tried to, was put into place. So that was during the time of Nimrod. And that's gonna we can go in the regular books of the Bible, but we will also add Jasher in that teaching. But CERN is a big collider machine that they've been using to manipulate matter, time, and particles to open up portals. And on the other side of those portals in outer darkness, they're not aliens, they're demons. There are angels that have been bound up to a certain time. And when they are successful in finally getting that portal open and those experiments, advance to where they need to advance, they're going to release hell on this earth because we are coming into the last days. We are in the last days, but like we're getting deeper in. And I would dare to say that some of those seals and some of those trumpets have already come to pass. But when we delve into Revelations, we will dissect that. That is CERN. I tried to make it make sense. I hope it made sense to y'all. I know it was a lot because it was a lot for me when I was studying it. But I will open this thing up now for any questions after I stop recording. And the recording